So we finally heard from ARNE SLOT, with Liverpool having released their first official interview with the new manager today. And I know there's been some frustration among fans about the delay between the official announcement of his appointment and of course his first interview coming, but finally it's here, and now we do know a little bit more about the new manager. And there are some interesting details, I think, in this interview that I want to go through now and have a look at. And I think probably the best place to start is what I think is the newsiest angle of all, which is confirmation of ARNE SLOT's coaching staff, or as much as we know about it so far. Now, we did know, and there has been confirmation from Slot finally, that Sipka Hulshoff will come in as his assistant, and that Ruben Peters, both of whom were at Feyenoord, he will be the physical performance coach. So there's confirmation from Slot that those two will come in, but there's also some news around the fact he's appointing a goalkeeping coach. Now, we knew that there was going to be someone needed in that position. Obviously, John Achterberg and Jack Robinson departing, and although Claudio Taffarel is staying, we knew that there was another goalkeeper coach needed. Now, the guy who's going to come in is someone called Fabian Otter. Now, he's previously worked at Borussia Mönchengladbach up until the end of last season, and he's currently the goalkeeping coach for the United States national team as well. Now, he's away at the Copa America with them at the moment, working on that, so he might maybe be a little bit delayed in coming into pre-season, but it's going to be interesting really to see where he's up to in terms of, will he try and balance the United States work with being at Liverpool, or is this going to be his full-time job? I'm sure we'll have to find out about that, but I think what we know in the early stages is he's very highly rated in what he does, a very highly rated goalkeeping coach, so really interested to see how he gets on. I think he might actually do a deep dive on the channel, having a deeper look into who he is and what he will bring to the table as well, because that is a massively key appointment. It's been John Achterberg in that role for such a long time at Liverpool, so to have a fresh face in there, it's going to be really interesting. That really sets the tone in terms of how Slot wants his goalkeepers, but also the team as a whole to play, because the goalkeeper is absolutely key to that, isn't he, in terms of being able to use the ball and squeezing up the space. So really interesting that it's finally been appointment made, and as I said, that's one of the most interesting aspects actually of this interview, that Slot has confirmed that one, and that we know a little bit more about what his backroom staff is going to look like. Now, of course, and he did mention this in the interview, there are still appointments to make. You know, that backroom staff isn't finished yet. Now, we know that he wanted to bring in Etienne Reinen, who was a coach and an analyst with him at Feyenoord, but unfortunately it doesn't look like that's going to happen. My understanding on that front is that work permit issues are very likely now to scupper that deal, so it doesn't look like Etienne Reinen is going to be coming, which essentially opens up a slot for another for another coach to come in, and so there's another vacancy there. We also know that Liverpool are looking for a set-piece coach as well, so that's another element that they're going to want to add to the backroom staff. So it's not completely finalised, this backroom staff and this team behind Slot, but as I said, interesting that he's alluded to who the extra man is going to come in and be the goalkeeping coach, so we've learned a little bit more from that. Now, other interesting aspects of the interview, I thought, the first was the fact that I mentioned, at the start of this video, that the delay had been sort of the topic of a lot of debate among Liverpool supporters, hadn't it? Why has he not spoken to fans yet? Why does he not want to address them? And he actually, spoke about this. It was the second question in the interview, and I thought it was really interesting. He alluded to it actually, and he suggested that basically the reason that there'd been a delay was, to allow Jurgen Klopp to have a full farewell that he deserved after such a long and successful period at the club, which I thought was a really classy touch actually for him to mention that and to say, that was one of the reasons why there's been a little bit of a delay. And he kind of assuaged any fans' fears as well about, what he's been up to in that period. I think there's some who believe that, okay, well, he's gone on holiday, that means he's not doing anything to prepare for the new season, but he put those fears to one side today and said, I'm going to use the quote in this bit, he says, "But let's be clear, I don't start today. I've been in a lot of contact with staff members already, from people who are working here to new staff members that are coming in, and of course, almost every day, Richard Hughes and me are calling each other because we have to talk. This is a very important phase for the new season to make sure the team is ready, and we have to play in pre-season." So I think that's, if anyone was worried that while he was sunning himself and enjoying his holiday that he wasn't doing anything to prepare for this, the biggest challenge of his career so far, I think Slot has put those to one side now, hasn't he, and shown that he's definitely been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to prepare for this new season. And as you would expect that from a manager, obviously, got to talk about a lot of things, but transfers one of them. What pre-season looks like, how they work in that way, and what the pre-season period is going to look like for all the staff really. So I think it's interesting now. In terms of the other elements of his preparation, he was asked about that. You know, how else do you prepare? You know, beyond the phone calls and the meetings that he's had in this period of the early part of the summer, and he spoke about taking a lot of advice from Jurgen Klopp. Now, you'll remember that Jurgen Klopp said himself, didn't he? Look, if ARNE SLOT wants to give me a call at any point, I'm more than happy to speak to him, and clearly that has taken place. Slot himself said in this interview that he has been speaking to Jurgen Klopp and getting a lot of advice from him. He did also say, actually, and I thought it was an interesting part, is that he wants to make his own judgment on the players. So yes, he'll take Jurgen Klopp's word for it, but he also wants to see them himself and make his own judgment. So that's an interesting element that, you know, yes, he values what Klopp is going to tell him, but he's his own man. And that was, I think, a theme that kind of came through in the interview, is that there's similarities, but he also wants to be a little bit different to Jurgen Klopp. And that, as I say, that's been a theme of it. Now, of course, talking to the old manager is part of it, but also he's been talking to players as well, and he's mentioned the fact that he'd been having conversations with Virgil van Dijk, said that it was a bit easier with him because he's Dutch, so he could speak in Dutch, so that was quite handy for him. Now, it's interesting, I think, this element, because I had heard, you know, from sources that, you know, there haven't been a lot of talks with players in the squad apart from Van Dijk himself, and that, you know, a suggestion that some would say, well, you know, is that taking a little bit of a risk to not get yourself on side with the players straight away? You know, is he presuming that they're all going to like him? Is he not want to get on the front foot with them and strike up that relationship straight away? And when I heard that, I kind of thought, you know, that's an interesting point. Is it worrying that he's not doing that? But he actually almost addressed this in the interview itself and sort of explained that, look, the Copa America's happening, the Euros are happening, a lot of the players in the squad are preparing for tournaments, and he doesn't want to sort of distract them from that. He doesn't want to, you know, get in the way in terms of that. So so that's been kind of a delay. And also, he said, look, if I'm going to meet the players, you know, rather than be on Zoom or over the phone, he would rather do it face to face, really, and introduce himself in that way. So I think a lot of the players are going to meet and speak to him for the first time when they report for pre-season, which is an interesting way of doing it, I suppose, but he feels it's the best way of managing those relationships, and you know, you've got to be able to, as a manager, you live and die by those principles and how you want to work, and if that's the way he wants to do it, then that's the way it's going to be done. And he did allude, actually, to, you know, the importance of relationships with players, with staff, as a key sort of element of him as a manager, really, you know, one of his big selling points, really. And said, you know, he's big on forming relationships and keeping strong relationships. And I think, you know, again, that's kind of struck me as one of the similarities, again, between him and Jurgen Klopp, really. Klopp's so big on Klopp the person as much as being the world-class manager that he was. So clearly, you know, there's similarities there, isn't there? And he also alluded to the fact that there are similarities in terms of the style of football that they play and the way that they want to be aggressive, they want to dominate possession. So it's clear to see, isn't it, from this interview, and we spoke about this in videos that I've done, talking about why Liverpool wanted to appoint him, but he's really backed that up, is that similarities in terms of personality, similarities in terms of style of play, and as much as Slot emphasised that he wants to be his own man, he is willing to acknowledge that there are a lot of similarities between him and Jurgen Klopp, and that is, you know, one of the reasons why he got the job. Now, another element of preparation I thought he, you know, talked about in this that I thought was interesting was, he's not just been watching Liverpool games to prepare for this job, he's also been watching training sessions from last season, which again, you know, is to give him an idea of how the players approach the work, what sessions Jurgen and Pep Linders have been doing with the players to ready them to play that style of football, give him an idea of what he needs to tweak, if the things he wants to do differently, what the players' attitudes are like in training, who trains well, who's maybe a little bit harder to get training well, who's you know, maybe doesn't put it in 100 miles an hour. And that's you know, an important insight, I think, because, you know, at the end of the day, any successes you get at the weekends in games are all, you know, they're all, the foundations for those are laid in the week, and you know, and the hard work that players do in the training ground. So to get an insight into that, I think shows you that he's very, very thorough in his approach. As I say, he's thorough. You know, he's looking at those elements of it, wants to look at how the players prepare and everything like that. So I think that's, yeah, I think that's, you know, reassuring for fans, really, that he really approaches his work in that way. And to watch training sessions, it seems kind of crazy, but I think it seems a very good idea to preparing for what it's going to be like to take this squad, because he's going to have a truncated pre-season with a lot of this squad, isn't he, because of the international tournaments that are on. So important that he knows what he's coming into and how to deal with the players as quickly as possible. Now, one other element that I know a lot of people will want to know a little bit about is obviously transfers and how things are going to work in that. And he did talk a little bit about that. He was asked about the fact that his job title is head coach, which is obviously slightly different from manager. So he did talk about that, and he talked about transfers, and he said, and I think it's best to use the quote in this instance, he said, me and Richard are going to work together when it comes to transfers, but not only the two of us, there's a big backroom staff included in this, of course all the recruitment staff, I think in Barry Hunter and all those staff behind that who work so hard on recruitment. He's going to have to work with them as much as it is just Richard Hughes. It's not one man making the decisions. He says, I think for me it's the way I've worked always, and for me it's the ideal way of working because I can use the most of my time by working with the team, and the time that's left will probably be a bit for the family and a bit to talk with Richard about how we can strengthen the team. So he's clearly really buying into that sort of collegiate approach that Liverpool want. You know, they want it to be a collaborative effort. Jurgen Klopp had so much power, didn't he, in transfers towards the end of his tenure, and Liverpool want to go back to what they see as sort of a safer system, and it's clear from this, I think, that Slot really buys into that. He's happy to work in that way. That's the way he worked at Feyenoord, and that's the way that Liverpool are going to progress. So that kind of answers that question. He seems clearly that he's okay in working in that way, so there's not going to be any issues or butting of heads over transfers, which I think is really important because there is some business to do this summer, and there will be some business to do in the following summer, so it's important that everybody is singing off the same hymn sheet in that front, absolutely. So reassuring, I think, to hear that. And I think the final question as well was an interesting one. He was asked almost for his message to supporters, and he said the question almost caught him by surprise a little bit. He wasn't expecting it, but I think he had a bit of a rallying cry to supporters. He said there is a change, but the change hopefully isn't that big because we still have the same players, we still have the same fans, and if both of them are going to do the same job, that will make my life a lot more easy. I'm expecting them to show up again in the upcoming season, and the same for the players. I will do everything within my interest and power to lead the team in the best possible way. So really good, strong message, I think, to finish things off in his first interview. And obviously in these interviews there are a little bit of underarm questions because they're official questions from the club, aren't they? They can't get asked the gritty questions, so to speak, or the tough ones. But I still think there are ways to answer it that can encourage you or discourage you. And I think he clearly speaks in a good way. He can engage supporters, which is a massive part of his appeal. You have to be engaging when you come after Jurgen Klopp, and you have to be a good football manager. Now, we knew the good football manager element was taken care of by his achievements at Feyenoord, so we knew he had real talent there. But I think in his talking there and the way he appeals to fans personally, that gives me real hope that he could be someone who really clicks with fans. And if that clicks early, then hopefully Liverpool can make a good start to his first season, and then things can really snowball from there. So I think a really interesting first interview and a fascinating insight into the new manager. Now, of course, there is more to come, as I'm saying. Obviously, there will be a press conference coming soon, maybe before the end of this month, and we'll hear from ARNE SLOT himself, and obviously I will be there to ask him questions and see how he deals with the media. So really looking forward to that. Now, of course, the best way to keep across this and follow it is, of course, to subscribe to the channel. So if you're not a subscriber, do click that button now and make sure you can follow along, because as I say, we'll be there to meet ARNE SLOT for the first time and give you hopefully a little bit more insight into what he's like. And then, of course, pre-season after that, and then before you know it, we'll be into the season. So it's a really good time to follow the channel if you don't. And if you can like the video as well, of course, that is always massively helpful. And as I said in the last video, we're always hoping for some transfer news. I'm sure now that Slot has been unveiled that that's going to really start ramping up. So that's a really exciting time, and for that reason I'm sure it won't be too long till I put up my next video. So I'll see you guys very soon.